Episode Interpol, Immigration, and the FBI, Part 3. Random Tales of Traveling, Living, and Working Abroad. One time when a producer and I went to visit a game developer in Seattle called Undead Labs to see if we would sign a contract with them to develop a game, a zombie game which would be called later The State of Decay. While there were certainly tales of due diligence assessment, what stood out to me from this trip, was the Canadian immigration border. This time, however, it was not about me at the border. It was about the producer that was traveling with me. The producer had asked that we stop at a grocery store on our way back to Canada. He wanted to stop in a Washington State store to buy some Cheez-It snack crackers. Apparently, he loved Cheez-Its. But Canada does not sell Cheez-Its. His only source of Cheez-Its was the United States of America, the United States of Cheez-Its. And he did not just buy a box or two of Cheez-Its. He filled 2 carrier totes full of Cheez-Its boxes. He cleared the entire store shelf of every single Cheez-Its box they had. Somewhat embarrassed by his excessive Cheez-Its acquisition, he asked that perhaps we should just put them in the trunk and not tell Customs and Immigration about them. He argued they're just snack foods, they won't care. At the border, the agent asked if we purchased anything or if we were bringing anything back with us. I deflected. I did not lie. I refused to lie. And so I stressed, I did not purchase anything. I am not bringing anything back. I added, we were visiting a potential video game developer in Seattle. We are from Electronic Arts. The customs agent began to wave us through, but the producer exclaimed desperately, "We have a trunk full of Cheez-Its! We have a full trunk of Cheez-Its!" He was literally sweating and panicked. The border agent demanded to inspect the trunk now, and upon seeing grocery bags full of Cheez-Its crackers, she returned and said, "You must love Cheez-Its. You're clear to go." I learned a few lessons from that experience. People can have odd passions for specific kinds of foods, for whatever reason. Had we stuck with our sole purpose to assess a video game developer and not detour to buy Cheez-Its, things would have been fine. And it underscored that people can make a plan, but they may not stick with it, even if it might get them into trouble. People can have a momentary emotional breakdown over small things, even smuggling a few grocery bags of snack cracker Cheez-Its. Let me tell you of another curiosity while living in Canada. It was a discovery that Canada has excessive import tariffs, even for things that are mailed to you from individuals. For example, we had a gift mailed to us from the States, a blanket, and we had to pay half the cost of the original blanket fee according to its written price on the international shipping label as a tariff tax. Let me restate that. We had to pay half the price of the blanket just to receive it in the mail. Here's another one. Beans and taco sauce in Canada were easily 4 times the price of the exact same item from the same manufacturer just across the border in Washington State, USA. Consequently, every few months, Catherine and I would drive across the border to buy bags of beans and taco sauce. I guess they were our Cheez-Its. However, we always declared them on our return to Canada. One time, when returning to Canada though, the Customs and Immigration officer was near jaw-drop dismayed, hearing and inspecting our many declared bags of beans and taco sauce. And, just like the would-be smuggled Cheez-Its, the agent declared, "You must love beans and taco sauce." I replied, "I like quesadillas and burritos." To which the agent replied sarcastically, "I guess you do. You love your quesadillas and burritos." And we were waved through to return to our Vancouver, Canadian downtown home. On another occasion, before I worked for Electronic Arts and was working for Interplay Titus Interactive as the US Technical Director. Yeah, I was the only US Marshal of Technology in North America for Titus. When entering Canada through YVR Vancouver International Airport to see a developer, going through security, I placed an original Xbox prototype development kit on the security X-ray scanner conveyor belt. The customs agent inspected the somewhat white translucent encased Xbox and said, "This looks like a bomb. What is it?" Well, I assured him that it was not a bomb. I explained that it was a video game development kit from Microsoft for a brand new video game console that would be coming out. Well, it turned out the agent loved computer games, and with an emotional excitement, he expressed, "Go on through," and he let me pass with my development kit. It's kind of funny. I had no proof that it was an Xbox prototype development kit. I had no proof that it was not a bomb or any kind of threat. And yet I was approved to proceed entirely based on the agent's love of computer games. I must say, I'm glad to have gone through, but that did not seem appropriate or safe. Yet on another occasion, while I was working for Xbox Studios and Microsoft, I was stopped at the UK Heathrow London Airport Customs and Immigration for a discovery of a hard drive in my suitcase. They asked what was on the hard drive and why was it separate from a computer, all by itself. I have to imagine that I am not the only person that has traveled with a hard drive, and yet they acted like I was a pariah for having it. And so I answered, the hard disk was a complete game image, including all raw art, sound, music, etc. I explained that raw data is huge because it is lossless, it is not compressed, it is everything. I furthered there is even interim processed data that expedites the builds. And there are also multiple images of a game that is in development. I suppose it was sufficient confident sounding technobabble that the agent surrendered trying to understand. And they decided it was best to stop delaying others from being processed through security and just let me pass through with my hard drive. On another occasion, while also working for Xbox Studios and Microsoft, a producer that reported to me was driving to visit a Canadian-based developer from our Redmond, Washington Xbox studio. Well, as is typical, Canadian Immigration and Customs asked him what the purpose of his trip to Canada was. The producer had a surprising and off-putting reply. He declared that he was a US of A citizen and that he worked for Microsoft. And his work was top secret. They could not know what it was. And it would take the President of the United States of America to compel him to expose the secrets and the secret project that he was working on. Americans cannot be questioned by Canadian immigration, so he declared. Customs and Immigration would have nothing of the arrogance and attitude of this producer. They arrested and detained him. They locked him inside a mostly empty office. They contacted his manager at Microsoft Xbox Studios, in my team, which quickly escalated to me. We had to de-escalate with Canadian Immigration and show them that we were handling the situation and that it would never happen again. Well, Canada released the producer. He was to never enter Canada again. He was returned to the greater Seattle area. And we formally designated that that producer could not travel internationally for at least 6 months, and he must attend training to work internationally. Well, regarding my own long-term immigration in Canada, getting back to that, I spent the next 6 years or so in Canada working with a work permit and temporary residency permit renewed every year. Catherine and I even became permanent residents of Canada, PR status, which is the equivalent to a green card in the United States. You have all rights, but you cannot vote. Like I said, Electronic Arts EA hired an immigration attorney for me who used to work for Canadian Central Immigration, CIC, and so he had a lot of influential connections. In any case, I followed his guidance. I kept my nose clean, as they said, as the former CIC attorney strongly advised. He said to never get into any trouble, not even an argument, no intoxication in public, nothing. I never even got a traffic citation, not even a speeding ticket. The immigration attorney declared that any single violation or run-in with the law would almost certainly result in my immediate expulsion from Canada forevermore. And he informed me that Interpol was tracking me, not just individual countries or the FBI. He said they would likely track me for the rest of my life. He noted that any crime, anywhere in the world, would likely result in my expulsion from Canada as well. Again, it was all silly and unjustified. Nothing ever happened, other than a waste of my life and abuse of my wife and our emotions. Canada has an immigration process for becoming a Canadian citizen. The US recognizes dual citizens of America and Canada. And so, my wife and I petitioned to become permanent residents, PR status of Canada. Like I said, we basically petitioned to become green card status, but within Canada. Permanent residence, PR documents grant full legal rights, like I said, except for the right to vote. Also, you had to have PR status before you could apply for citizenship. You also had to be PR status if you're to work in Canada. I think it was over 7 years. Canada requires application for permanent residence to occur exclusively at country ports of entry. In other words, my wife and I had to drive out of Canada into the United States, turn right around, and drive back into Canada to complete our immigration permanent residence application. Well, once we were back in Canada and inside the immigration office, the immigration clerk shook his head with obvious borderline hate. He challenged that I should not be allowed to become a permanent resident of Canada, given my terrorist background. He expressed disdain for the magistrate from CIC that let this happen. He made my wife and I sit around for many hours until his shift ended and he went home. The next shift of immigration officials processed our PR documentation immediately and we were done. Simple. It was remarkable how much hatred that immigration officer held for me, a person that he had never met, had never known before in his entire life, all because I had a piece of paper. And my so-called FBI file, it said nothing really. It just basically said I have a voided potential terrorist label. In other words, it's voided. It's not relevant. They're not supposed to do anything. Well, I guess not knowing why I am tracked left a lot of imagination for individual agents. With the demise of Fusion, I had taken a job with Microsoft Xbox back in the United States in Seattle-Redmond area of Washington State. In returning to the United States, my Canadian permanent residence status would expire eventually, and it would be abandoned near term, our path to dual citizenship. Once, when visiting a developer in Canada myself, after I no longer worked or lived in Canada, an immigration agent stopped me to chastise me for abandoning my PR status with the great and wonderful country, Canada. He challenged that he should not let an effective traitor to Canada enter the country. I will never know if he was serious or just giving me a bad time, but if he was a very good actor. Whatever the case, He let me into Canada, and that was the end of that story.